He gave up everything for $1 to save an Apache woman. She devoted her life to repay him. The man had once believed life would give him more than this. He had worked hard when he was younger, trusted people who promised him steady work, and followed rules that never seemed to protect him. Over the years, bad luck and unfair choices slowly took everything away. By the time this story begins, he owned almost nothing. His clothes were worn thin, his boots had holes, and his pockets were empty except for one last dollar coin. That coin was all he had left in the world. He lived on the edge of a dusty frontier town where people rarely looked at each other with kindness. Everyone was busy surviving. If someone fell behind, they were quickly forgotten. The man survived by doing small jobs when he could, fixing fences, carrying supplies, cleaning stables. Some days he earned a meal. Other days he went asleep hungry under the open sky. That morning the town was louder than usual. Voices gathered near the trading post, sharp and careless. Curious and hoping maybe there was work, the man walked closer. A crowd had formed, standing in a loose circle. At the center stood a few rough-looking men and beside them an Apache woman. She looked weak. Her clothes were torn and dirty, her hands tied loosely in front of her. Dried marks of pain covered her arms. Her long hair hung around her face, hiding her eyes. She did not fight or speak. She stood still, like someone who had learned that resistance only brought more suffering. The men were laughing, speaking loudly about her as if she were an object. One of them announced that she was no trouble anymore and that anyone could take her, not because she was valuable but because they did not want the burden of her. No one in the crowd stepped forward. Some people looked away. Others smirked. To them she was nothing but a problem. The man felt something tighten in his chest. He had seen cruelty before. This town was full of it, but something about the woman's silence struck him deeply. She did not beg. She did not cry. She simply waited for whatever would come next. It was the look of someone who had already lost everything. One of the men grew impatient. He raised his voice and said they would let her go for almost nothing. $1, he said, laughing. That's all she's worth. The crowd laughed with him. To them, it was a joke. The man reached into his pocket and felt the cold metal of his last coin. That dollar was meant for food. Maybe bread, maybe a small meal that could keep him alive another day. Without it, he had nothing. No money, no shelter, no promise of tomorrow. He told himself to walk away. He told himself this was not his problem. He was already barely surviving. He could not save anyone else, but his feet would not move. He looked again at the woman. For a brief moment her eyes lifted. They met his. There was no hope in them, no request. Only exhaustion and acceptance. That was when he understood. If he walked away, she would not be safe. Something worse would happen, and he would carry that knowledge for the rest of his life. Slowly, with shaking fingers, he stepped forward. "I'll pay," he said. The laughter stopped. The men turned, surprised. Someone scoffed. "You," one of them said, looking him up and down. "You don't even look like you can feed yourself." The man said nothing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the coin. He held it up so they could see it clearly. $1, he repeated. The men laughed again, but this time it was sharper. Still, a deal was a deal. One of them snatched the coin from his hand and waved him away, already bored. "Take her and go," he said. "She's your problem now." Just like that, it was done. The man felt fear rush through him. He had acted without thinking through the consequences. He was now responsible for another life when he could barely care for his own, but even with the fear, he did not regret it. He walked to the woman and gently untied her hands. He was careful not to touch her more than necessary. She flinched at first, then relaxed slightly when she realized he was not hurting her. "You're free," he said quietly, though he was not sure freedom was the right word. She did not answer. She simply followed him when he stepped away from the crowd. They left the town together, walking toward the open land beyond the buildings. The sun was high and the road ahead looked long and unforgiving. The man had no plan. He only knew they could not stay. As they walked, he kept a respectful distance. He did not speak much, afraid his words might scare her. After some time, he offered her the small piece of bread he had been saving. She hesitated, watching him closely, then took it with careful hands. She ate slowly, as if she did not trust that more food would ever come. They reached a quiet area near some low hills by evening. The wind grew colder as the sun dipped down. The man gathered what little wood he could find and made a small fire. It was weak, but it gave a bit of warmth. He sat on one side of the fire and gestured for her to sit on the other. She did, keeping her eyes on the ground. He could see she was exhausted. Every movement seemed to cost her effort. "I won't hurt you," he said softly. "You don't owe me anything." She did not respond, but her shoulders eased just a little. That night he barely slept. Hunger gnawed at him and fear whispered in his mind. He wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. He wondered how they would survive tomorrow. But every time he looked at the woman sleeping near the fire, curled inward like someone used to pain, he knew he had done the only thing he could live with. In the darkness, memories of his own past returned. Times when he had needed help and no one had stepped forward. Times when he had been ignored, treated as less than human. He realized that saving her was not only about her. It was about refusing to become the kind of person who looked away. When morning came, the fire was nearly out. The woman was already awake, watching the land carefully, as if danger could appear at any moment. When she noticed him stirring, she gave a small nod. It was not a smile, but it was something. They began walking again with the sunrise behind them. The man did not know where the road would lead. He only knew that his life before was gone. The dollar was spent. The old survival rules no longer applied. He had given up everything he had for one small choice. And though neither of them understood it yet, that single choice would shape both their lives in ways neither could imagine. The morning after they left the town, the man and the Apache woman walked in silence. The road ahead was rough, full of stones and dry earth that cracked under the hot sun. The man had no idea where they were going. He had no plan. All he knew was that he had promised himself silently to keep her safe. That promise was stronger than fear, stronger than hunger. The woman's steps were slow. Her feet were bare and the sharp stones hurt her soles. Every now and then she would stumble slightly, but he quickly reached out to steady her. She did not speak and he did not press her. Words were not necessary yet. Trust was built slowly, quietly. They stopped at a small stream where the water ran clear and cool. The man knelt to drink first, cupping the water in his hands. He watched her carefully. She stayed on the bank, her eyes scanning the surrounding land as if danger could come from anywhere. Then slowly, she bent down to drink. Her hands shook, and she whispered a quiet thank you. It was the first sound she had spoken, and it made the man feel a strange warmth in his chest. He realized then that the road ahead would be more than just a journey of miles. It would be a test of patience, endurance, and human kindness. He had given her freedom with one coin, but now freedom meant survival, and survival was never easy. They walked until noon, stopping under the shade of a few trees. The man had found some wild berries along the way and shared them with her. She looked at the small offering, then at him, before slowly taking a few berries and eating them. She did not smile, but the gesture itself spoke volumes. She was beginning to trust him just a little. As the days passed, the difficulties of life outside the town became clear. They had no shelter. They had no food saved. Every step of the journey depended on what they could find along the way. Sometimes they went without meals for a whole day. Some nights the cold wind blew through the hills, and they huddled close to keep warm. He shared his small coat with her, wrapping it around her shoulders while he shivered in the cold. One evening, after a long day of walking and searching for food, the woman sat by a dying fire, her head resting on her knees. She had fallen silent again, but her eyes followed his every movement. The man realized that she was not used to having someone care for her. Her life before had been filled with cruelty and neglect. Now even the smallest act of kindness seemed strange to her. He decided not to push her. He only said, "Rest. We will keep going when the sun comes up." She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. For a long time they sat there together in silence, listening to the wind and the distant sounds of animals in the hills. In that quiet, he felt a connection forming, not of words but of shared experience. She had survived much, and so had he. Together, they were stronger than alone. The next morning, they continued their journey. The man noticed that the woman watched him more closely now, learning from his actions. When he searched for water or food, she observed carefully, and sometimes without being asked, she helped. Once, she pointed out a patch of edible roots near a large rock. He smiled at her quietly, impressed by her knowledge. Survival was not easy, but together they could manage it. Even so, the journey was not without fear. On one day, a group of men appeared on the hill above them. They shouted, asking questions about who they were and why they were on that land. The man immediately stepped in front of the woman, keeping her behind him. He spoke to the men calmly but firmly, refusing to answer unnecessary questions. The men grunted, unsure what to do, and eventually left them alone. Afterward, the woman looked at him with something like respect in her eyes. He realized that protecting her went beyond food and water. It meant facing danger, facing the world for her, too. Days turned into a week. Their bodies were tired, but they were learning. The man taught her how to find water in dry areas, how to find berries that were safe to eat, and how to spot tracks of animals. She was quick to learn. In return, she taught him about the plants he had never noticed and warned him about small dangers he would have missed. Though neither spoke much, each moment built trust. Slowly, the woman began to open her heart in small ways. One morning, she picked a small flower from the side of the trail and handed it to him. He looked at it carefully and then at her. She smiled slightly, almost shyly, and turned her eyes away. He understood the gesture immediately. It was her way of saying thank you without words. He carefully placed the flower in his pocket as if it were a treasure. One night when the wind was stronger and the fire would not stay lit, the woman took her coat and offered it to him. "You cold," she said in a low voice. He took it gratefully, wrapping it around himself. That night they slept closer than before, not out of necessity but out of trust. The woman's small acts of kindness were speaking louder than any words could. The journey tested their patience, endurance, and courage. Hunger, cold, and danger were constant companions. But through it all, something stronger grew between them, a silent bond, built on care and survival. She began to realize that the man did not see her as a burden or property. He saw her as a human being, deserving respect and protection. For the first time in years, she did not have to hide. She did not have to fear every moment. One day, as they rested near a small stream, the man noticed that she was watching the water, studying how the fish moved and how the current ran. He asked softly, "Have you been near water like this before?" She nodded slowly. "Not safe," she said. "People cruel." He said nothing. He simply offered her some water to drink and let her drink in peace. The simplicity of his kindness, repeated day after day, seemed to touch her in ways words could not describe. She had spent years learning not to trust anyone, but here, in the middle of nowhere, someone cared for her simply because it was right to care. The man felt a quiet satisfaction, though he was always aware of their fragility. One wrong step, one mistake, and everything could fall apart. But he did not let fear stop him. He kept moving forward, helping her when she faltered, carrying her when she could not walk, and finding what little food the land offered. By the end of the second week, the woman began to speak in small phrases more often. Not full sentences, but enough to let him know her thoughts. She warned him of snakes, she suggested paths to take, and she even laughed quietly when he stumbled over a root or a rock. The sound was soft, but it brought a strange warmth to his heart. Through all these small moments, a change was happening. The woman was learning that freedom was not something to fear. The man was learning that giving everything for another person could bring meaning to life, even when he had almost nothing left. Together, they were creating a small world of trust, where survival depended not on cruelty or strength alone, but on care, understanding, and respect. Though the journey was far from over and danger was never far away, both of them felt a sense of hope. Not loud or bold, but steady and quiet, like the small stream they had crossed many times. They were strangers who had found each other at the right moment, and that connection was now stronger than fear, stronger than the hard land that stretched endlessly around them. The man sometimes caught himself watching her, seeing how she moved, how she noticed the smallest details of the world, how she survived with a quiet strength he had never imagined. And she, in turn, watched him. She had seen men who promised safety and then abandoned her. But this man had given up everything, risking himself for her. Slowly, she realized that her devotion could only be repaid in the same way, through loyalty, care, and quiet acts that showed she was no longer someone who could be ignored. The road stretched on, long and endless, but neither of them saw it as punishment anymore. They had survived the town, survived hunger, survived the wild. And in that survival, they had discovered something stronger than fear, the beginnings of trust, the spark of respect, and the quiet warmth of companionship. By the time the sun set on the 14th day, they had traveled farther than the man had expected. They set up a small fire under a rocky overhang for shelter. The woman gathered dry grass for bedding, arranging it carefully so they could both sleep more comfortably. For the first time, she worked beside him without being told. As they lay by the fire that night staring at the stars, neither spoke much. But they understood each other without words. Trust was growing, quiet and steady, like roots taking hold in rocky soil. Both knew the world was still dangerous, but for the first time in years, they did not feel completely alone. And so the journey continued, two people, walking together, facing hunger, cold, and fear, but finding small moments of safety, kindness, and connection that made every step worthwhile. They had survived the first trials, and the bond they were building would soon be tested in ways neither could imagine. The days that followed were hard, but they were growing stronger together. The man and the Apache woman had learned to read each other's silent signs. He could tell when she was tired before she said anything. She could sense his mood by the way he moved or paused. They no longer needed many words. Survival required attention, care, and quiet understanding, and both were learning to give that without expecting anything in return. One morning, as the sun rose over the dry hills, they found themselves at the edge of a forest. The trees were tall and close together, their leaves forming a dense roof that blocked the bright sunlight. The man slowed his steps, listening to the rustle of small animals in the underbrush. He knew the forest could hide dangers, snakes, wild animals, or people with bad intentions. He held out his hand slightly behind him, a silent signal for the woman to follow carefully. She obeyed without question, her eyes wide and alert. They moved slowly through the trees, stopping often to watch for movement or sounds that did not belong. At one point, a small fox crossed their path, darting into the shadows. The woman smiled quietly for the first time. It was small, almost unnoticeable, but to the man it felt like a victory. She was beginning to feel the joy of seeing life, not only surviving it. As they continued, they found a small stream running through the forest. The water was clear and cold. The man knelt first, dipping his hands into the cool current and drinking. The woman watched him carefully before taking a small sip. He noticed her hesitation. "The water is safe," he said softly. She nodded but waited, as if trusting him slowly. They decided to rest by the stream for the afternoon. The man gathered some dry branches and made a small fire. The woman, watching him carefully, began helping. She collected twigs and arranged them around the fire. She did not speak much, but her actions showed trust and a willingness to learn. The man realized that survival was becoming a shared effort. While they rested, the man began teaching her small skills that would help her in the wild. He showed her how to spot edible plants, how to track animals by the marks they left, and how to move quietly so they would not attract attention. She learned quickly, surprising him with her sharp observation and understanding. Sometimes she even taught him things he did not know about the land. Her knowledge of the forest and its hidden secrets became a valuable part of their journey. Despite these small victories, danger never left them. One afternoon, a storm moved in without warning. The sky darkened and heavy clouds blocked out the sun. Rain poured down, soaking their clothes and chilling them to the bone. The man quickly found a small overhang of rocks and led the woman under it. They huddled together for warmth, shivering as the rain pounded around them. She leaned against him, her body trembling, and for the first time she allowed herself to depend completely on him. When the storm passed, they discovered that part of their path had been washed away. The mud was slippery and the rocks were dangerous. The man took her hand, helping her navigate the difficult ground. She followed his guidance carefully, trusting him fully. In that moment, they realized that their survival depended not only on skill but on complete trust in one another. As the days turned into weeks, the bond between them grew stronger. They began to talk more, though their words were simple. She told him about her past in small fragments, carefully choosing what to share. He listened without judgment, understanding that her silence had been a shield for many years. In return, he spoke about his own struggles, the losses he had faced, and the mistakes he had made. These conversations, though brief, created a connection that went deeper than words alone. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, the man noticed that the woman was looking at the horizon with a distant expression. He asked quietly, "Are you thinking about your family?" She nodded slightly, her eyes glistening. "They gone," she said, "I alone." He reached out and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You are not alone now," he said. "I will stay with you." Her lips curved into a small smile and she leaned against him. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of safety and comfort. The man, in turn, felt a deep responsibility, but also a quiet satisfaction. His choice to give up everything for her had brought a meaning to his life that he had never known. Not all days were calm. On one morning, they heard voices and the sound of horses in the distance. They quickly hid behind a dense cluster of trees. Through the branches, they saw a group of men riding toward them. The men were rough-looking and armed. The man knew they were dangerous, perhaps people looking for trouble or those who would see the woman as property. He whispered to her, "Stay behind me. Do not move." She obeyed, her small frame pressed close to him. He stepped forward, speaking in a firm voice that carried through the forest. "We are not looking for trouble," he said. "Leave us be." The men scowled but did not advance. The man's calm confidence and protective stance made them hesitate. After a tense moment, they rode away, leaving the pair alone. The woman let out a quiet breath she had been holding, and the man patted her hand gently. "You see," he said, "we can face danger together." The experience reminded them that the world was still full of threats. But it also reminded them of their growing strength. They had survived each challenge by trusting each other, by acting together, and by relying on their combined knowledge. Over time, the woman began to take initiative in their survival. She suggested paths to take, pointed out animals to hunt, and even prepared small meals when she found berries or roots. Her confidence grew, and the man encouraged her, proud of her progress. She was no longer just a survivor. She was learning to live fully, to take control of her own safety, and to care for someone else in return. One night, as they sat by the fire, she handed him a small piece of leather she had found and cleaned. "Here," she said, "keep." He looked at it surprised. "For what?" he asked. "For you," she said simply. "Thank everything." He smiled quietly, realizing that her gift was more than an object. It was her trust, her gratitude, and her growing devotion. In return, he promised silently to continue protecting her, no matter what dangers lay ahead. As the weeks passed, the man noticed subtle changes in her. Her steps were stronger. Her eyes held more confidence. She laughed softly at small things, sometimes teasing him gently. These moments were rare but precious, showing that she was beginning to heal from the fear and pain of her past. The journey continued to test them. They faced harsh weather, rough terrain, and the constant uncertainty of finding food and water. But through every challenge, they relied on one another. The woman learned to trust her instincts, and the man learned that giving oneself fully to another person could create a bond stronger than any fear. By the end of the third week, they had traveled far from the town where their journey began. The land was more open now, with rolling hills and scattered trees. They had learned to survive together, but they also knew that more challenges awaited. The man looked at the woman and realized that she had become not just a companion but a partner. They had faced danger, hunger, and fear together, and they had grown stronger for it. At night, as they lay under the stars, the woman rested her head on his shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft but full of meaning. The man held her hand and looked up at the sky. "No," he said quietly. "Thank you. You have given me something I thought I lost, hope." In those quiet moments, surrounded by the wilderness, they both understood that survival was no longer just about food or safety. It was about trust, respect, and shared strength. They had become a team, relying on each other in ways neither had imagined when the journey first began. And so, day by day, they moved forward. Their bond grew with every shared hardship, every quiet moment of care, and every small act of courage. The woman's trust, once fragile and hesitant, was now growing into something steady and strong. The man's selflessness, given freely for her sake, was creating a life neither had expected, a life built on respect, loyalty, and the quiet devotion of two people who had found each other when the world had turned its back. They did not yet know what the future held, but they faced it together. Each day was a small victory, each step a proof that kindness, courage, and trust could survive even in the harshest of lands. And in the quiet strength of their shared journey, something deeper began to grow, a promise that they would not only survive but protect and care for one another, no matter what came next. The man and the Apache woman had been traveling together for weeks. Their bond had grown strong, yet the world around them remained dangerous and unpredictable. One morning, as the first rays of sun painted the hills gold, they noticed smoke rising in the distance. It was the sign of a settlement, or worse, of people. The man immediately felt tension tighten in his chest. Settlements meant townspeople with their own rules, or worse, people who would see the woman as property or a prize. He crouched low behind a cluster of rocks and whispered to the woman, "Stay close to me. Do not speak. Watch everything." She nodded silently, her eyes wide and alert. The trust between them had grown, but danger always reminded them that caution was necessary. As they crept closer, they could see a group of men standing outside a small cabin, armed and shouting. Their voices carried across the clearing, harsh and loud. One man, taller and meaner looking than the rest, held a rifle in his hands and appeared to be giving orders. The man quickly realized they were not friendly, and that the woman might be in danger if they noticed her. He placed a hand gently on her back and guided her behind a larger tree. "We cannot be seen," he whispered. "They will come after you." She pressed herself close, shivering slightly, but remained calm. Over time, she had learned to trust his instincts, and she knew he would protect her. For the next hour, they watched quietly as the men moved around the cabin. The man observed carefully, noting the patterns and movements. He realized they had to find a way around the settlement without being noticed. Every decision now mattered. One wrong move, and all their safety could be lost. When a brief opening appeared, He gently took her hand and led her through the underbrush. Their steps were careful, silent, and slow. The men never noticed them, and the pair finally emerged on the far side of the clearing, hearts racing but safe for the moment. "That was close," the woman whispered, finally speaking. Her voice was soft, but it carried a mixture of fear and relief. "Yes," he said quietly, "but we are safe now. Stay near me always." After they were sure the danger had passed, they continued their journey. The event left a mark on both of them. It reminded the woman that not everyone in the world would be kind. It reminded the man that protecting her required constant vigilance, courage, and sometimes facing threats that could cost both of them everything. A few days later, they reached a narrow canyon. The walls rose high on both sides, creating shadows that hid movement but also created risk. They moved carefully, watching for animals or people who might be in the area. The woman, noticing the danger, held back slightly, letting the man take the lead. Suddenly, a branch snapped above them. Both froze. The sound echoed through the canyon, sharp and sudden. From the shadows, a group of men emerged, armed and angry. Their leader pointed at the woman. "There she is," he shouted. "Bring her back." The man stepped in front of her without hesitation. His stance was firm, unyielding. "She is not yours," he said, his voice steady. "Leave now or face consequences." The men laughed at first, not believing one man could stand against them, but the man did not waver. He had already decided that he would face any danger for her. He did not think of himself, only of keeping her safe. One of the men stepped forward with a knife. The man acted quickly, blocking the attack and pushing the man back. The woman watched, fear and admiration in her eyes. She had never seen someone risk everything for her like this. She realized in that moment how much she owed him, not with money but with loyalty and care. The fight was brief but intense. The man used his strength and knowledge of the terrain to outmaneuver the attackers. By the time the others realized he was serious, they were already retreating. The canyon echoed with their angry shouts as they disappeared into the distance. When the danger was gone, the woman ran to him, placing her hands on his shoulders. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. I would be gone without you." He shook his head gently. "No," he said. "We survived together. You must be brave too." That night, as they made camp in a safe clearing, the woman could not stop thinking about what had happened. She realized that her life had changed forever because of this man. She thought about the risks he had taken for her, the comfort he had offered when the world had shown her only cruelty, and the way he had treated her as a human being, not as property. She began to feel something she had not felt in years: devotion. It was quiet and steady, growing stronger with each day they survived together. She knew that she wanted to repay him, not with words or gifts, but with loyalty, care, and courage. She wanted to be someone he could rely on, someone who could face danger with him, and someone who would never abandon him. The following days were challenging. Food was scarce, and water had to be found carefully. The land was rough, with rocky paths, deep streams, and patches of thorny brush. But the woman, learning from the man, began to anticipate challenges before they became dangerous. She would find berries before they were gone, point out safer paths, and warn him when she sensed trouble. Together, they became a team, moving silently, thinking ahead, and watching each other's backs. One morning, they came across a small herd of deer grazing near a stream. The man whispered, "We must be careful, hunt only what we need." The woman nodded. Using the skills she had learned, she helped him track the animals, mark the safest path, and avoid dangerous areas. For the first time, she felt useful in a way that was not about survival alone, but about partnership. The man noticed her growing confidence and felt proud. He realized that her devotion was not only gratitude, it was the growth of a strong, capable person he could trust completely. That night by the fire, the woman offered to share the small portion of meat they had prepared. "You first," she said softly. He shook his head, smiling gently. "We share," he said. Always. They ate together, sitting close to the warmth of the flames. For a moment, they allowed themselves to forget the dangers of the day and the uncertainty of the road ahead. In that simple act of sharing, they found comfort, trust, and connection. As the days passed, their bond deepened. The woman began to speak more, telling him small stories of her past, memories of her family, the people she had lost, and the lessons she had learned from hardship. He listened patiently, never judging, offering comfort when she needed it. In return, he shared parts of his own life, moments of loss and mistakes, creating a connection built on honesty and respect. One afternoon, as they rested on a hilltop overlooking a wide valley, the woman looked at him and said, I will not leave you. Never. The man paused, touched by her words. You don't have to promise, he said, but I am glad you feel that way. We face this world together. Her eyes shone with determination. She had seen too much cruelty to trust easily, but now she trusted him completely. She had decided that she would devote herself to helping him, protecting him, and standing by his side no matter what. Their journey continued, filled with small victories and challenges. They faced hunger, harsh weather, and rough terrain, but each difficulty strengthened their bond. The woman learned to navigate the land, find food, and anticipate dangers, while the man learned that courage and devotion could come from someone who had once been broken and afraid. By the end of part 4 of their journey, they had traveled far from the town where their story began. They had faced danger together, survived attacks, and learned to trust one another in ways neither could have imagined. The woman's devotion had grown into something powerful, a promise of loyalty and care. The man's bravery and selflessness had shown her that kindness could exist even in a harsh world. Together they had learned that survival was not just about food or safety. It was about trust, respect, and shared courage. And as they looked ahead at the path yet to come, both understood that their lives were forever linked, bound by the choices they had made, the dangers they had faced, and the devotion they now shared. They did not yet know what the future held, but they knew one thing for certain. They would face it together, as partners, as friends, and as two people who had found in each other the courage and strength to survive. The man and the Apache woman had been traveling together for months now. They had faced danger, hunger, and the harshness of the land. They had survived attacks, storms, and exhaustion. Each challenge had brought them closer together, building a bond stronger than fear or weakness. Yet despite all they had endured, they still did not know what the future held. Every day was uncertain. Every step could bring new challenges. But one thing was clear. The woman had decided that her life belonged not just to herself, but, in a way, to him. Not because he demanded it, but because of everything he had given her. He had risked his life, given up his last dollar, and shared what little he had without asking for anything in return. That act of courage and kindness had changed her forever. She could never repay him with money or gifts. The only way she could truly honor him was through loyalty, care, and devotion. One morning, as they rested near a calm river, the woman spoke quietly. "We go far," she said. "I stay with you, always." The man looked at her, surprised. Her words were simple, but the meaning behind them was clear. She had made a promise to him without needing to say more. He nodded, feeling a weight in his chest. It was a mixture of pride, relief, and deep gratitude. "We face the world together," he said softly. They continued their journey, moving carefully but with purpose. The woman had grown stronger and more confident. She helped navigate difficult paths, gathered food, and watched for dangers in ways that the man no longer had to manage alone. The partnership between them had grown so complete that they no longer saw themselves as two separate travelers, but as a single unit. One day, while crossing a wide plain, the man stumbled and injured his ankle. He had misjudged a step on a loose stone, and pain shot through his leg. The woman acted immediately. She helped him sit down and carefully examined the ankle. With skill and care, she fashioned a splint from a branch in strips of cloth, wrapping it securely. She spoke softly to him all the while, calming him, assuring him that he would be fine. "You strong," she said, "but I take care now." He smiled faintly, grateful not only for her help, but for the way she had grown capable, confident, and willing to protect him when needed. For the first time, he realized that their journey had not just been about saving her. It had been about creating a bond in which both of them could depend on each other fully. Days later, they arrived at a small village near a river. Unlike the first town, this place was quieter, more accepting. People looked at them with curiosity rather than suspicion. They could rest here, find food, and plan their next steps. The woman immediately began to gather water and prepare a safe place for them to sleep. She moved with confidence and care, demonstrating that she was no longer the frightened, silent girl from the town where their story began. The man watched her and felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. She had survived unimaginable hardship, yet she had grown into someone strong, capable, and devoted. He realized that her devotion was not born from fear or obligation, but from gratitude, respect, and a shared experience that had taught both of them the value of trust and care. Over the following weeks, the woman continued to show her devotion in quiet, meaningful ways. She prepared meals, repaired their clothing, and tended to injuries when needed. When the man worked on small jobs for food or supplies, she would accompany him, helping to carry heavy loads or warn him of potential dangers. Every action demonstrated her commitment to repay the kindness he had shown her, not with words, but through her loyalty and care. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, the woman sat by the fire and handed him a small bundle. Inside were herbs and roots she had gathered for medicine, carefully cleaned and prepared. "For you," she said softly, "keep healthy." He accepted it with a nod, his eyes reflecting quiet emotion. "You have already given me more than I could ask for," he said. "Your care is worth more than anything." The woman smiled faintly, her eyes shining. She had learned to show her devotion in acts rather than words, and each act carried the weight of her promise. She was not simply surviving, she was thriving, giving back to the man who had given her life, freedom, and hope. Time passed, and the seasons changed. They faced cold winds, rainstorms, and harsh sun, yet they endured together. Their bond became unbreakable. The woman learned to hunt small game, recognize edible plants, and navigate the land with skill. The man taught her everything he knew, but she added her own knowledge and experience, creating a partnership stronger than either could achieve alone. One day, while they were resting near a hill, the man turned to her. "I have seen how much you have grown," he said. "You are strong, brave, and wise. I could not have asked for better company." She looked at him, her eyes soft but firm. "I owe you my life," she said, "but not just life. I owe you my loyalty, my care, my heart." He nodded quietly, touched by her words. "That is more than enough," he said. "You do not need to say more. Your actions have shown me already." The woman spent her days caring for him in countless small ways. She made sure he ate enough, rested when tired, and avoided unnecessary risks. She learned to anticipate his needs, often preparing for him before he even asked. Her devotion was quiet, steady, and consistent, a reflection of the deep respect and gratitude she felt for him. The man, in turn, continued to protect her, guide her, and encourage her. He had given up everything for her once, and now he realized that their lives were connected in a way that neither could undo. He no longer felt the emptiness he had carried for so long. Her presence, her care, and her trust had brought purpose and meaning back into his life. Over time, they became well known in the small village and surrounding areas as a pair who worked together, survived together, and cared for each other. People saw the strength of their partnership and the quiet devotion between them. The woman's loyalty and care were admired, and the man's courage and kindness were respected. Their story was no longer just about survival. It was about the power of trust, human kindness, and the deep bonds that could form between two people who had chosen to stand by each other no matter what. One cold winter morning, the woman awoke early to prepare a fire. She moved quietly so as not to wake him, making sure he had warmth before he stirred. She smiled faintly to herself, knowing that every act of care she performed was a way of honoring the man who had given her a second chance at life. When he finally awoke, he noticed the fire and the small breakfast she had prepared. "You are too good to me," he said quietly, smiling. She shook her head, her eyes serious but kind. "No," she said, "I repay, for life, for everything." The man nodded, understanding fully. Their journey had not only been one of survival but of learning how to give, how to care, and how to build a life together. She had devoted herself to him not out of obligation, but out of gratitude, respect, and love. Her loyalty and care were the repayment for the one small coin that had changed both of their lives. As the years passed, the bond between them grew even stronger. They faced new challenges, but now they faced them together with skill, confidence, and trust. The woman's devotion never wavered, and the man's courage and guidance never faltered. Together, they had built a life filled with quiet happiness, mutual respect, and deep connection. Looking back, both understood that their story had begun with one simple act, the man giving his last dollar to save her. That act had sparked a lifetime of loyalty, care, and devotion. What seemed like a small choice had changed the course of both their lives, creating a bond that could survive any challenge. In the end, the woman's devotion was complete. She had repaid him not with wealth or words, but with a lifetime of care, trust, and companionship. And the man, who had once thought he had nothing to offer the world, realized that giving everything for another person could create something far greater than survival. It could create love, respect, and a life filled with meaning. They had survived the hardships of the wild, faced danger together, and built a partnership based on trust, loyalty, and human kindness. The man and the Apache woman had become more than travelers. They had become family to each other, bound by the choices they had made, the dangers they had faced, and the devotion that had grown steadily over time. As they sat by a fire one evening, watching the sun dip behind the hills, the man turned to the woman. "We made it," he said softly. She nodded, her eyes reflecting the flames and her quiet determination. "Yes," she said, "because together." And together, they had found not only survival but life, purpose, and the true meaning of devotion.